Thank you very much for the presentation. I'm originally from Ukraine, and I will speak about Ukrainian collection in National Library of Ukraine. So it's just context for your understanding, but I will give you some details and maybe you ask questions more about this collection and in general this persona that I introduce you to. Imagine walking into the largest private library of all Prussia in 1750. 22,000 volumes line on the shelf of Professor Daniel Salthenius' house in Königsberg, each book carefully catalogued and organized according to the intellectual framework of Enlightenment. Among those thousands of books tucked between Danish chronicles and Swedish historical treatises sits the revealing collection labeled Livonica, books about a region that had recently vanished from the political map, yet perished as a cultural and scholarly category. When Salthenius died in 1750, his extraordinary library was prepared for auction. The resulting catalogue, published in 1751-52, provides us a unique window into the Enlightenment scholars' organizing knowledge, and specifically how they understand Baltic region identity through the lens of their book collection. But before we delve into catalogue itself, we must acknowledge one of the most intriguing legends surrounding our protagonist, Daniel Salthenius. On January 30, 1780, young Daniel Salthenius then served as a pastor of a small village in the north of Stockholm, village of Markim. Allegedly wrote a contract with his own blood and nailed into sacred oak tree. In exchange for soul, he demanded a black book of spells and purse that never empty, and maybe for that money he bought his 22,000 actually book, collecting the biggest library at the period. The note was discovered, police was called, and scandal erupted, and any document that saved from Salthenius' legacy is this bloody written note in the Museum of Uppsala University, where he studied. Whatever his incident actually occurred and represent folklore attachment to Salthenius' later extraordinary success, it speaks to something remarkable. Here was a man who, within 3 decades, assembled the largest private library in Prussia. Perhaps he made a deal not with devil, but the emerging world of Enlightenment scholarship, where knowledge itself became a form of wealth. The irony that despite owning 22,000 volumes, Salthenius himself had become a relatively forgotten figure. His name rarely appears in scholarly discussions, overshadowed by Józef Aleksander Jabłonowski, the Polish nobleman who purchased his collection and transported it to Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. Salthenius' personal manuscripts and archives have vanished. We know him only through remarkable catalogue of what he owned, not by what he wrote. In a sense, his intellectual legacy exists as a memory palace, accessible through only 1751 auction catalogue. The catalogue, sorry, it was late for this information, but the catalogue itself separates in 2 parts. The first one called Rareones and Rarissimi, the rare and the rarest books, organized in 4 parts inside it. And by subject and format matters. So the first one is the folio and quarters, the second volume is eighths and so on, the third will be 16ths and so on. So it's thematically and in size of books, how they organized in, I think originally in the library, how they shelved there in Königsberg house, they cataloged it in that way for the auction. So in that 2 volumes, Livonica appears in in a group with Danica, Norvegica, Svevica, and Livonica. Reflects the recent political history of Swedish imperial control over Baltic territories, treating Livonia as natural part of the Nordic cultural sphere. But in the main catalogue, the second volume, that is not rarissima, 3,000 volume, another 1,800 volumes, the general, it was in category Italica, Livonica, and Lusitanica. It's not something compares to the imagination of the world with Italy and Portuguese books, but only for the practical purposes, because no more Scandinavian books were in the main part of the library, so they just put together all the section of the organizing catalog. So it was just practical way, not something ideological. And what we have there from Livonica in this perspective. We have Balthasar Russow, of course, Chronica der Provinz Livlandia of edition, the second edition of 1584. Catalog notes as rarest editio optima et rarissima. Chronicle of the recent years, because the second edition he wrote up to 1583, going the newest events. He was a German pastor in Revel. Russow wrote as an eyewitness to the Livonian Wars, creating what became essential source for understanding the collapse of medieval Livonia. And Salthenius possessed his work, and his catalogue devoted unusual space to documenting its bibliographic importance, reveals the centenarity of the text of any serious Livonica collection. And he got 2 copies in the main catalogue under position 1611. The same edition we see once again, and of course he possessed as a main book of Livonica studies 2 copies. The pattern of combining doublets for those books the same for Kirch's Peace and War History, and the same copy, and also about pactual defense materials. Both of them are very prominent for the history of Livonia. Christian Kelch, a German pastor who served in Estonia and learned Estonian language, representing the newer generation of scholarly pastor historians. And his work, Theatrum, is and another position is after this Kelch is Caspar von Kreumann's Theatrum Livonicum, is genealogical and administrative work listing all the classical and secular rulers of Livonia, also cites that. And then we have this duplicate of the volume dedicated to von Pacul. He was a Livonian nobleman, but he has a conflict with monarchy, and this is like materials of his defense and court of the period, so becomes this Protestant European celebrity person that very famous story published there. And also, if you're going through the list, we will find some other interesting materials dedicated to legal history of Livonia, and also some other documents. So what those books says us about intellectual networks behind those books? Of course, the main point will be Königsberg in the middle of this network. It's a map about the life of Salthenius and his political understanding of the period, and also includes some like Dansk, Stockholm, Riga, of course, in this Baltic region, connection between those books, figures, and so on. If we see more closely, for example, Christopher Hardkoch wrote in 1676 dissertation De Curorum and Smagdalorum Republica. In this catalogue mentioned, he defended as his thesis in the University of Königsberg, and it was like pioneering critical methodology in Baltic studies by treating indigenous Curonian and semi-gradients as legitimatical historical subject with their own political system, and is present here in his rich library. And another example is a Swedish German academic network from that perspective, Christian Nettelbrandt, born in Stockholm but educated in multiple German university. He studied Kurland and then published several books on that region with some original materials, first in Rostock 1729 and then in 1736 present in Salthenius library as well. But in this classification, if we go into intellectual understanding, in the first part, as I said, it represents the current historical events and understanding the Danica, Norvegia, Svevica, and including Livonica around this Baltic region should be the same. But in the second one, it's more practical way of organizing everything. And if we have no more Scandinavica, let's put what was previous, the chapter before it was Italica, the next one will be Lusitanica, and put together because it's only small element of books, just practical way. So it's about when we going through catalog studies, especially at the Enlightenment, when we want to or intend to understand them as a reflect of their vision of the world, but in many ways it's just practical way of organizing book, no more in ideological way. It's not something that influence on me. We can argue that it is reflects the Enlightenment-era and the understanding of the world. It's not. It's just practical way of organizing a huge amount of books, and we need to be more accurate or more slightly take care with these arguments and catalog studies. And also what they included, most of the works were German perspective of the world and understanding of the region, and it was Protestant works only, and many legal codes, church organization, and so on. Only that part. And we almost missing some original prints from the region. Only one printed in Riga of second or third edition of German scholarship, and also another perspective is not something that was valuable for Salthenius to take. And about my general topic and this lost library, almost to conclude, we have, sorry, I lost my text a bit, almost physically books nowadays in Vernadsky National Library of Ukraine, but we have this department of special collections, and it means they keep the book as a collection. For example, collection of Jabłonowski will be separate books for Jabłonowski collection. And we don't know how many originally volumes are from Salthenius library, because all 22,000 was bought by Jabłonowski and moved to contemporary Ukrainian lands. And we see this catalog as interesting journey, intellectual journey more than physical and geographical. We see different stories from Russow, eyewitness chronicle of the period, to Estonian documentation in the original material to the political legacy of particle history and the importance for Salthenius and intellectuals of the period. But in conclusion, the irony of the whole story is that he created his world actually and bought a lot of books that cost a lot of money, and he wants his magical books that create this memory palace of Salthenius. And we preserve this story, but still the story untold, and maybe this publication of this conference will be first one on the Salthenius network and intellectual heritage, and we may learn from his library about this person. And also my intention is to track if those books are in Kiev now at the moment or not, because as far as we know, only 20% are saved from 22,000, so it's around 5,000 to 6,000, but each book keeping in original original Jabłonowski catalog system, so it's unpublished, it's publicly available. So if you want to study any book from, for example, you know, from the Salthenius catalog or Jabłowiana was published, but it's the same catalog, just republished under another title called Jabłowiana, but they are totally the same in any position. You should just ask a librarian in Kiev if they got and they do research in archive and say yes or no. In many cases, I go through the catalog for another research, and I find that almost all that I want volume from original Salthenius catalog is in Kiev. But at the moment, we are not sure what the size of the library preserved or not. Thank you very much for your attention.